She survived 6 years of abuse, escaped, rebuilt her life, promised herself never again. And then she met the man who felt like salvation. He was gentle, patient, supportive. He encouraged her friendships. He listened to her trauma. He said, "I will be your peace." And for 8 months, he was perfect. But here's what she didn't know. The man she married did not exist. His name was fake. His past was fabricated. And every loving gesture was part of a documented plan to destroy her. He tracked her phone, read her messages, took notes on her fears. And when she finally tried to escape, he was already waiting in her back seat. She was murdered at 32 years old by the man who promised to protect her. And the most terrifying part, he's still free. This isn't a love story. This is a warning. And if you've ever thought he's too perfect to be dangerous, you need to hear this story. CT. Hello, family and besties. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 100 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Lifetales by Sally, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Some women survive their first nightmare only to walk straight into their last. This is the story of Michelle Thompson, a 32-year-old kindergarten teacher from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who thought she'd finally escaped the darkness of her past. She thought she'd found her second chance at love. She thought Eric Chambers was her salvation. She was wrong. And by the time she realized it, it was already too late. What you're about to hear is not a fairy tale. It's not a redemption story. It's a tragedy that will haunt you long after these words end. Because sometimes the person who promises to protect you is the one you need protection from. And sometimes love doesn't save you. It buries you. Let me take you back to where it all began. Minneapolis, 2019. Michelle Thompson had just signed the final divorce papers that freed her from a 6-year marriage to Darnell Jackson, a man whose love had turned into control, whose affection had twisted into violence. For 6 years, Michelle had endured emotional manipulation, constant surveillance, and a suffocating grip that made her question her own reality. Darnell would check her phone, interrogate her about every conversation, every glance, every moment she wasn't within his sight. Her friends had seen the light leave her eyes. Her sister, Shanice, had begged her to leave for 3 years before Michelle finally found the courage. The final straw came on a cold February night when Darnell screamed at her for 4 hours because she'd smiled at a parent during a school conference. 4 hours. That night, something in Michelle broke, and then, miraculously, something in her healed. She packed 2 suitcases while he was at work, left a note on the kitchen counter, and drove to Shanice's apartment in Brooklyn. The divorce was brutal. Darnell contested everything, dragged it out for 18 months, sent her threatening texts that made her hands shake. But Michelle stood firm. Her lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Owens, fought like hell for her. And in August 2019, Michelle walked out of that courthouse a free woman. She stood on those courthouse steps, feeling the late summer sun on her face, and she made herself a promise. Never again. Never again would she lose herself in someone else. Never again would she ignore the red flags. Never again would she give her power away to a man who didn't deserve it. She would be careful. She would be cautious. She would guard her heart like a fortress. But here's the thing about fortresses. Sometimes we build them so high that when someone finally scales the walls, we're so grateful for the company that we don't ask how they got in. Enter Eric Chambers. 6'2", smooth voice, dark eyes that seem to look right into your soul. Michelle met him in October 2020, 14 months after her divorce was finalized. She was at a coffee shop in suburban Los Angeles, where she'd moved for a fresh start and a new teaching position at Oakwood Elementary. She'd gone to LA to disappear, to rebuild, to become herself again. Eric was sitting 2 tables away, sketching in a leather journal. When Michelle's laptop died mid-lesson plan, he looked up with a smile that could melt glaciers and offered her his charger. They talked for 3 hours. He was a freelance graphic designer, he said. Originally from North Dakota, but had been bouncing around the country for work. No permanent address, no roots, no baggage. Just a man searching for meaning, for connection, for home. "I've been looking for someone real," he told her that first day, his hand resting gently on the table between them. "Someone who knows what it's like to hurt. Someone who's been broken and put themselves back together." Michelle's heart, that fortress she'd built so carefully, cracked just a little. Because Eric seemed to understand. He asked about her past, listened without judgment, held space for her pain. He told her about his own childhood trauma, an abusive father in Fargo who'd beaten him and his mother until they fled in the middle of the night when Eric was 12. He spoke of foster homes, of learning to survive, of swearing he'd never become his father. "I know what monsters look like," Eric said during their fourth date, his eyes glistening with what looked like genuine tears. "I've spent my whole life running from them. And I promise you, Michelle, I will never be that for you. I will be your peace." And God help her, she believed him. How could she not? Eric was everything Darnell wasn't. Where Darnell controlled, Eric gave freedom. Where Darnell demanded, Eric suggested. Where Darnell isolated, Eric encouraged her friendships with Shanice, with her work colleagues, with everyone. He seemed almost too good to be true. But here's the crazy part. Michelle actually questioned it at first. 3 months into their relationship, she sat across from Shanice at a Brooklyn diner during Christmas break and confessed her fears. "He's perfect, Sean. Too perfect. What if I'm missing something? What if I'm so desperate to believe in good men that I'm ignoring the signs again?" Shanice, who'd flown in from Brooklyn to meet this new man, squeezed her sister's hand. "Michelle, I've watched you with Darnell. I've seen what abuse looks like. This isn't it. Eric looks at you like you hung the moon. He encourages you. He lifts you up. Sometimes, sis, the good guys do exist. Let yourself be happy." Michelle wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. And when Eric proposed on her birthday in March 2021, on the beach at sunset with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, she said yes through tears of joy. Finally, she thought. Finally, the universe was giving her what she deserved. The wedding was small, intimate, perfect. Just 30 people at a garden venue in Pasadena. Shanice was her maid of honor. Eric's best friend from North Dakota, a quiet guy named Terrence, was his best man. Michelle wore a simple cream dress that made her feel like herself, not like a princess or a fantasy, but like Michelle Thompson becoming Michelle Chambers. The woman who survived. The woman who loved again. The woman who won. And for 8 months, it was beautiful. God, it was beautiful. Eric and Michelle moved into a 2-bedroom house in a quiet Minneapolis suburb, a compromise between his wandering spirit and her desire for stability. The house had a blue door and a porch swing where they'd drink coffee every Sunday morning. Eric converted the spare bedroom into a studio where he'd design logos and brand materials for small businesses while Michelle graded papers and planned lessons. They had rituals. Tuesday nights were for cooking together, trying new recipes, laughing when the food turned out terrible. Fridays, they'd go thrifting, hunting for vintage frames for Eric's art and old books for Michelle's classroom library. Saturday mornings meant farmers' markets and fresh flowers for the kitchen table. They'd dance in the living room to old R&B, Eric spinning Michelle until she was dizzy and breathless with laughter. "This is what I always wanted," Michelle told him one night in June, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Just this. Just peace. Just you." Eric kissed the top of her head. "You deserve every bit of it, baby. Every single bit." He was attentive in ways that made her friends jealous. He'd leave notes in her lunch bag. He'd text her throughout the day, just to say he was thinking of her. When she had a hard day with a difficult parent or a student who was struggling, Eric would draw her a bath, light candles, sit on the bathroom floor, and listen while she processed. He never tried to fix it. He just held space. On their 6-month wedding anniversary, Eric surprised her with a weekend trip to a cabin in northern Minnesota. No phones, no internet, just them and the woods and a lake that looked like glass. They stayed up all night talking about their future. Maybe a baby in a year or 2. Maybe a dog first. Maybe they'd travel, see the world, make memories that would last forever. "I want forever with you," Eric whispered as the sun rose over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I want to grow old with you. I want to be the man who never lets you down." Michelle kissed him, tasting coffee and promises on his lips. "You already are that man." But here's what Michelle didn't know. Here's what she couldn't have known. While she was falling deeper in love, while she was building a life, while she was trusting again, Eric Chambers was not who he said he was. Eric Chambers didn't exist before 2018. The real Eric Chambers, born in North Dakota in 1986, had died in a car accident in 2017. The man Michelle married had stolen his identity, created a life out of lies, and constructed a personality specifically designed to be everything Michelle needed after surviving Darnell. His real name was Marcus Donovan, and he had done this before. Twice before, in fact. In Portland. In Phoenix. Different names. Different women. Different outcomes. But the same pattern. Find a woman who's been broken. Study her wounds. Become the medicine. And then, when she's completely dependent, completely trusting, completely vulnerable, take everything. The shift started so small that Michelle almost missed it. November 2021. They'd been married 8 months. Eric started working longer hours, staying in his studio until 2, 3 in the morning. When Michelle would knock softly and ask if he was coming to bed, he'd snap at her, something he'd never done before. "I'm working, Michelle. This client is important. Can you just give me space?" She'd retreat, confused, hurt, but she rationalized it. He was stressed. Money had been tight. He was probably just tired. Everyone has bad days, right? Everyone has moments. This didn't mean anything. This wasn't Darnell. This was just life. But then came the questions. Subtle at first. Who were you talking to on the phone? Why did that parent conference run so late? What were you and Shanice laughing about on FaceTime? Michelle would answer honestly, openly, because she had nothing to hide. And Eric would nod, smile, kiss her forehead. "Just curious, baby. Just want to know about your day." But the questions became more frequent, more pointed. And they always came with that same smile, that same gentle tone, that same kiss that was starting to feel less like affection and more like a collar. In December, Michelle's coworker and friend, Jasmine, invited her to a holiday party. Michelle was excited. She missed having a social life outside of Eric. She missed her girlfriends. She mentioned it to Eric over dinner, and he went quiet. That terrible, suffocating quiet that reminded her of Darnell. "You want to go?" Eric asked, his voice flat. Yeah. I haven't been out with the girls in months. It might be fun." Eric set down his fork. "It's just interesting, that's all. I have that work dinner the same night. I was hoping you'd come with me. Support me. But I guess Jasmine is more important." Michelle's stomach dropped. "Eric, that's not fair. You never mentioned a work dinner." "I shouldn't have to mention it, Michelle. I thought we were a team. I thought we prioritized each other." His eyes went cold, distant, like he was looking through her instead of at her. "But go ahead. Go to your party. Have fun." Michelle didn't go to the party. She went to Eric's work dinner, smiled at strangers, and felt a familiar knot forming in her chest. That night, lying in bed, she told herself she was being paranoid. Eric wasn't Darnell. Eric was just hurt. Eric just wanted to feel important to her. This was fixable. This was love. This was normal relationship stuff. But here's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk through the door wearing a sign. It creeps in wearing the face of love. It speaks in the voice of concern. It touches you with hands that used to feel safe. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already wrapped around your throat. January 2022. Michelle discovered Eric had installed a tracking app on her phone. She found it by accident when her phone started glitching, and she took it to the Apple store. The technician, a young guy named Devin, looked at her with concern in his eyes. "Ma'am, you have a hidden tracking software running in the background. It's monitoring your location, your messages, your calls. Everything. Did you know about this?" Michelle's hands went numb. No, I didn't. Do you want me to remove it?" Michelle thought about it. She thought about the questions, the coldness, the way Eric had been watching her lately. And then she thought about the cabin by the lake, the flowers, the dancing, the man who had promised to be her peace. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. "No," she said quietly. "Don't remove it. Thank you." That night, she confronted Eric. Calm. Rational. Just asking. "Eric, did you put tracking software on my phone?" He didn't deny it. He didn't get defensive. He cried, actual tears streaming down his face as he sank onto the couch and put his head in his hands. "Michelle, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's my trauma, baby. After everything with my dad, after watching my mom get hurt, I have this irrational fear of losing the people I love." And Michelle, exhausted from years of fighting, tired of being suspicious, desperate to believe in the good in people, chose forgiveness. Eric deleted the app in front of her. He started therapy the following week with Dr. Harrison, a trauma specialist in downtown Minneapolis. He seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely committed to change. For 3 weeks, things got better. Eric was more like his old self. Gentler. Kinder. Michelle let herself breathe again. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Her sister Shanice called her on a random Tuesday afternoon, voice tight with concern. "Michelle, Why did Eric call me yesterday asking about your schedule? He wanted to know what time your flight was coming in when you visit next month. But I never told you about any surprise visit. I never planned one. What's he talking about? Michelle's world tilted. Sean, I have no idea. That night, she checked Eric's laptop while he was in the shower. What she found made her stomach turn. He had been reading her emails, her text messages, her DMs on social media. He had screenshots of conversations with Jasmine, with Shanice, with her mother. He had created folders, organized them by person, by date, like files in a surveillance operation. And there was more. A folder labeled M Protocol. Inside were notes. Pages and pages of notes. About Michelle. Her triggers. Her fears. Her insecurities. Mention Darnell when she gets independent. Reminds her of why she needs me. Use tears when caught. She can't resist vulnerability. Isolate from Shanice slowly. Sister is biggest threat to control. Michelle's hands shook so hard she could barely scroll. This wasn't love. This wasn't trauma. This was calculation. This was a plan. This was predatory. But here's the crazy part. The thing that still haunts everyone who knew her. Michelle didn't run. Not yet. Because when Eric came out of the shower and saw her at his laptop, he didn't rage. He didn't yell. He fell to his knees and sobbed like a broken child. You found it. God, Michelle, you found it. I'm sick. I need help. This isn't me. This is the monster my father put inside me. I've been fighting it my whole life, and I'm losing. Please don't give up on me. I'll do anything. I'll check myself into inpatient treatment. I'll leave if you want me to. Just please don't stop believing I can be better. You're the only good thing I've ever had. Michelle stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking at this man she'd married, this man she'd trusted, this man who had meticulously documented how to break her. And she made a choice that would cost her everything. She chose hope over evidence. She chose the memory of the good times over the reality of the bad. She chose to believe people could change. Okay, she whispered. Okay, but you check into treatment tomorrow. And you move into the spare room until I figure out if I can trust you again. Eric agreed to everything. And Michelle called her sister that night and lied for the first time in their entire relationship. Everything's fine, Sean. Eric's just been stressed. We're working through it. Eric never went to inpatient treatment. He went to 2 more sessions with Dr. Harrison and then claimed the doctor was trying to medicate him into submission. He moved back into their bedroom after only 5 days, wearing Michelle down with promises and apologies and that same wounded puppy expression that she couldn't resist. February brought a new kind of horror. Eric started disappearing for hours without explanation. He'd leave the house at midnight and come back at dawn smelling like nothing, like he'd been nowhere. When Michelle asked where he'd been, he'd turn it around on her. Why do you need to know? Don't you trust me? After everything I've shared with you, all my trauma, all my vulnerability, you still can't give me the benefit of the doubt? Maybe you're the one with trust issues, Michelle. Maybe you never healed from Darnell. Maybe you're projecting all your fear onto me, and I'm just the scapegoat for your unresolved trauma. It was so twisted, so skillfully manipulative, that Michelle started to doubt her own reality. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe she was damaged. Maybe she was the problem. Eric was in therapy. Eric was trying. Shouldn't she try too? Shouldn't she be more understanding, more patient, more forgiving? Her mother, Lorraine, visited from Brooklyn in early March. Within 2 hours of being in their home, Lorraine pulled Michelle aside in the kitchen. Baby, what's wrong with you? You look like a ghost. You're jumpy. You're quiet. This isn't you. I'm fine, Mama. Just tired from work. Lorraine grabbed her daughter's hands. Michelle Thompson Chambers, I raised you to be a lot of things, but a liar ain't one of them. That man out there. Something's off about him. I can feel it in my spirit. You need to leave. Mama, please. Not you too. Eric's been through a lot. He's dealing with trauma. I can't abandon him. Baby, you're not his therapist. You're not his savior. You're his wife. And a wife deserves to feel safe. Do you feel safe? Michelle pulled her hands away. You don't understand. You don't know him like I do. But the truth was, Michelle was starting to realize she didn't know him at all. That same week, she got a call from a blocked number. A woman's voice shaking desperate. Is this Michelle Chambers? Yes. Who is this? My name is Angela Morrison. I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona. Your husband, Eric. That's not his real name. His real name is Marcus Donovan. And he tried to kill me 3 years ago. Michelle's entire world stopped. What are you talking about? Angela's story poured out in a flood. She'd met Marcus in 2018. He'd called himself David then. He'd pursued her, love-bombed her, married her within 6 months. And then the control started. The tracking. The isolation. The psychological torture. When Angela finally tried to leave, Marcus pushed her down a flight of stairs. She'd woken up in the hospital with a fractured skull and no memory of the fall. The police investigated but couldn't prove intent. Marcus disappeared before they could question him further. "I've been tracking him for years," Angela said, her voice breaking. "I finally found him through a reverse image search on a graphic design portfolio site. That's him, Michelle. I'm looking at his photo right now. Same face. Different name. Please, you have to get out. He's dangerous. He's not going to let you leave. You have to run before he—" The line went dead. Michelle's phone had been yanked out of her hand. Eric stood behind her, his face a mask of calm fury. "Who is that?" he asked softly. "Just a wrong number," Michelle lied, her heart hammering. Eric's smile was slow, cold, reptilian. "Don't lie to me, Michelle. I can always tell when you're lying. Your left eye twitches. Did you know that? I've cataloged all your tells. Eric, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. Because I've given you everything. I've made myself vulnerable to you. I've shared my darkest parts. And you're still looking for reasons to leave. You're still talking to people behind my back. You're still trying to paint me as the villain. I'm not. Shut up." The roar came out of nowhere, primal and vicious. Eric grabbed her by the shoulders, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You don't get to speak anymore. You don't get to question me. You don't get to ruin what we have because you're too broken to recognize real love." He shoved her backward. Michelle stumbled, caught herself on the kitchen counter. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. The mask was off. The real Eric, the real Marcus, the real monster stood in front of her. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was in lethal danger. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I'm leaving right now." Eric's laugh was empty, hollow. "No, baby. You're not." Eric didn't hit her that night. He did something worse. He cried again. He apologized. He begged. He swore he'd blacked out, that the stress of his past had triggered something, that he didn't remember grabbing her. He showed her the bruises on her shoulders in the mirror and wept at what he'd done. "I'm a monster. Just like my father. You should leave me. I don't deserve you." And then he walked into the bathroom, and Michelle heard the medicine cabinet open. Heard pills rattling. Her nursing instinct kicked in before her survival instinct. She ran into the bathroom and found Eric with a bottle of sleeping pills in his hand, tears streaming down his face. "If I can't be the man you deserve, then what's the point? I can't live knowing I hurt you. I can't live with this thing inside me." Michelle grabbed the pills, flushed them, held Eric while he sobbed. And just like that, she became his jailer and his prisoner all at once. Because now, if she left and something happened to him, it would be her fault. If she ran and he hurt himself, she'd have to live with that forever. He'd made himself her responsibility, her burden, her chain. The next 3 weeks were a psychological nightmare. Eric oscillated between extreme sweetness and volcanic rage. He'd bring her flowers one day and scream at her for breathing too loud the next. He'd cook her favorite meal and then accuse her of poisoning his food. He stopped going to therapy, stopped showering, stopped sleeping. He'd stand at the foot of their bed at 3 a.m, just watching her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. Michelle tried to reach out. She called Shanice, but Eric was always nearby, listening. She tried to email Jasmine from her school computer, but Eric had somehow gotten her password and sent a reply from her account saying she needed space from everyone. She was trapped in her own home, trapped in her own life, trapped with a man she no longer recognized and maybe never knew. On March 28, 2022, Michelle made a decision. She was going to run. She'd been secretly packing a go bag, hiding it in her classroom supply closet at school. She'd been taking small amounts of cash from her account each week, so Eric wouldn't notice a large withdrawal. She'd made a plan to leave during her lunch break, drive straight to Shanice in Brooklyn, and never look back. But here's what Michelle didn't know. Eric had been planning too, and his plan was already in motion. That morning, Eric made her breakfast. Pancakes with fresh blueberries, her favorite. He was cheerful, affectionate, like the old Eric. He kissed her goodbye at the door, told her he loved her, told her to have a good day with her students. Michelle almost cried with relief. Maybe he was cycling out of the darkness. Maybe she could leave peacefully. Maybe she could just go. She taught her morning class in a daze, watching the clock, counting down the minutes until lunch. At 11:47 a.m., she grabbed her purse, told her teaching assistant she had a doctor's appointment, and walked to her car. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. She was almost free. She was almost safe. She was almost. Eric was sitting in her back seat. Going somewhere, Michelle? Her scream died in her throat. Eric, what are you doing here? How did you? I've had a spare key to your car since our honeymoon. Did you really think I didn't know about your little plan? I've watched you pack that bag. I've tracked every dollar you've taken. I've read every text, every email, every desperate little plea for help that you thought you deleted. I know everything, Michelle. I always have. He climbed over the seat, smooth as a predator, and locked the doors. Drive home. Now. We need to talk. Michelle's hands moved on autopilot. She started the car. She drove. And with every mile, she felt the trap closing tighter. She thought about jumping out at a red light. Thought about crashing the car. Thought about screaming for help. But Eric's hand rested gently on her thigh, and his voice was soft, almost loving. Don't do anything stupid, baby. Just drive home. Just you and me. We're going to fix this. We're going to be okay. I promise. When they pulled into the driveway of their house with the blue door and the porch swing, Michelle knew she was never leaving. Not alive. She could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in every instinct screaming at her to run. But Eric had planned for everything. And Michelle had run out of options. Inside the house, something strange happened. Eric let her go. He sat on the couch, head in his hands, and spoke in a voice so broken it almost sounded genuine. I can't do this anymore, Michelle. I can't keep hurting you. You're right to run. You should run. I'm going to let you go. But before you do, I need to tell you the truth. About everything. You deserve to know who I really am. Michelle stood by the door, keys still in her hand, ready to bolt. But something in his voice stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of her that still, despite everything, wanted to understand. Maybe it was just exhaustion. I'm listening, she said. And Eric told her a story. He told her about Marcus Donovan, his real name. He told her about a childhood of unimaginable abuse, about foster homes where he was beaten and worse. He told her about learning to survive by becoming whatever people needed him to be. He told her about the women before her, and how he'd never meant to hurt anyone, but the damage inside him was too deep, too permanent. I thought I could be different with you, he said, tears streaming down his face. I thought love could fix me. But I'm not fixable, Michelle. I'm broken in ways that therapy can't touch. And the worst part is, I really did love you. I really do love you. You're the only real thing I've ever felt. But my love is poison. And you deserve better. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a folder. Inside were documents. His real birth certificate. Court records from his childhood. Psychiatric evaluations that painted a picture of severe trauma and personality disorders. And articles. News articles about women who'd gone missing in Portland in 2017. In Phoenix in 2019. I didn't kill them, Eric said quietly. But I made their lives so unbearable that they disappeared. Kelsey from Portland, I never found out what happened to her. She just vanished one night. Police questioned me but had nothing. Angela from Phoenix, you talked to her. She survived. But there have been others, Michelle. Women whose names I don't even remember because I've become so good at erasing them from my mind. Michelle felt like she was going to be sick. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth before you go. Take this folder. Take it to the police. Tell them everything. I won't run. I won't fight. I'm done. I'm so tired of being this thing. Maybe prison is where I belong. Maybe I can finally stop hurting people. It was the most convincing performance of his life. And Michelle, desperate to believe in redemption, desperate to believe in the possibility of good, stood there and considered staying to help him turn himself in. Considered being the witness who finally brought him to justice. Considered. Michelle, Eric said softly, I need you to know something else. The reason I chose you. The reason I found you. It wasn't random. I saw you leaving the courthouse that day in 2019. I saw you standing on those steps, looking so free, so hopeful. And I thought that's the one. That's the woman who will finally save me. I followed you to LA. I staged that meeting at the coffee shop. I learned everything about you. I became exactly what you needed. And for a moment, just a moment, I really believed I could be him. The good man. Your good man. He walked toward her slowly, hands raised like he was approaching a frightened animal. But I can't. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Michelle's guard dropped. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to see him as human again, as broken, as pitiable. And that second was all he needed. Eric's hands wrapped around her throat so fast she didn't have time to scream. His face transformed from anguish to something cold and empty and utterly devoid of humanity. You really thought I was going to let you leave? He whispered as she clawed at his hands, as her vision started to blur. You really thought I'd confess and go to prison? Michelle. You're so smart and so stupid all at once. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel anything. That whole speech. That was me giving you one last beautiful memory before the end. Because I'm not a complete monster. I wanted you to remember me as someone who tried. Michelle's lungs burned. Her legs gave out. Eric held her up effortlessly, his grip never loosening. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was her own reflection in his eyes. And in that reflection, she finally understood. She'd never escaped her first nightmare. She'd just traded it for a worse one. And there was no one coming to save her. There never had been. Michelle Thompson Chambers died on March 28, 2022, at approximately 12:43 p.m. in the living room of her home in suburban Minneapolis. Eric wrapped her body in the sheets from their bed, the same sheets they'd picked out together at Target, laughing about thread count like it mattered. He placed her in the trunk of his car and drove north for 6 hours, to a remote area outside Grand Forks, North Dakota, where he'd grown up as Marcus Donovan. He buried her in the woods near an abandoned farm, unmarked and unmourned. Then he drove to the Canadian border, ditched his car, and crossed on foot using identification he'd stolen years ago. Marcus Donovan, Eric Chambers, David Richardson. All of them disappeared into the vast network of false identities he'd built over a decade. Michelle was reported missing on March 29th, when she didn't show up for work. Her teaching assistant, concerned by the abrupt departure the day before, had called her phone repeatedly. Shanice flew to Minneapolis immediately, broke down the blue door of Michelle's house, and found signs of a struggle. Blood on the living room carpet. Michelle's purse on the floor. Her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, deliberately placed, a final message from Eric. The police investigation went nowhere. Eric had been meticulous. He'd wiped everything. The tracking app on Michelle's phone led them to dead ends. The security cameras on their street had mysteriously malfunctioned that day. His laptop was gone. His phone was at the bottom of a river. Even his fingerprints in the house could be explained away. He lived there. There was no body, no weapon, no witnesses. Eric, or whoever he was, had vanished like smoke. And Michelle became another statistic. Another missing woman. Another cold case file collecting dust in a precinct basement. But here's the thing about grief. It doesn't need a body to be real. Shanice knew her sister was dead. She felt it in her bones, the same way Michelle had felt the danger too late. Lorraine flew in from Brooklyn, and the two women sat in that house with the blue door, surrounded by Michelle's lesson plans and Eric's lies, and they wept until there were no tears left. Months passed. The investigation stalled. The media moved on to fresher tragedies. But Shanice refused to let her sister become a forgotten name. She hired a private investigator, a retired FBI agent named Raymond Cole, who specialized in cold cases. Cole had seen everything in his 30-year career, but something about Michelle's case bothered him. The cleanliness of the disappearance. The precision. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was practiced. Cole started digging into Eric Chambers' background and hit walls everywhere. No credit history before 2018. No employment records. No school transcripts. It was like Eric Chambers had been born fully formed at 32 years old. But Cole had connections, resources, and a database of unsolved cases that spanned decades. In July 2022, Cole found the connection. Angela Morrison's assault case in Phoenix, 2019. The suspect, identified as David Richardson, had disappeared before questioning. Cole obtained the police sketch from that investigation and compared it to photos of Eric that Shanice provided. Same face. Different name. Then Cole went deeper. He searched for missing women in cities where Eric David Marcus had been. Portland, 2017. A woman named Kelsey Vaughn had vanished without a trace 6 months after marrying a man named Thomas Blake, a freelance photographer. Witnesses described Thomas as charming, attentive, too good to be true. Police found Kelsey's car abandoned near the Columbia River. No body was ever recovered. Seattle, 2015. A woman named Simone Harris was found dead in her apartment, ruled a suicide despite her family's protests that she'd never shown signs of depression. Her husband of 9 months, a man named James Whitfield, had disappeared the day before her body was discovered. The pattern was undeniable. Every 3 years, a new city, a new name, a new victim, and always the man vanished like a ghost, leaving behind destroyed families and unanswered questions. Cole presented his findings to the Minneapolis Police Department in August 2022. They reopened Michelle's case, issued a nationwide alert for Eric Chambers/Marcus Donovan, and contacted law enforcement in every city where they suspected he'd operated. The FBI got involved. His face appeared on news stations across the country. Someone somewhere had to have seen him. But here's the crazy part. No one came forward. Or rather, dozens of people came forward, but none of the leads panned out. He was a ghost who'd perfected the art of disappearing. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit created a profile. Highly intelligent, methodical, with possible antisocial personality disorder. He selected victims carefully, studied them, became their perfect match, and then destroyed them when the mask became too exhausting to maintain. And he was still out there. Somewhere. Planning his next move. Selecting his next victim. Becoming someone new. Shanice started having dreams about her sister. In every dream, Michelle was alive, trapped somewhere dark and cold, calling out for help. Shanice would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, and the grief would hit her all over again. Fresh. Raw. Unbearable. She couldn't work. Couldn't eat. Couldn't function. Her therapist diagnosed her with complicated grief and PTSD. Your sister's body hasn't been found, Dr. Williams explained gently. Your brain doesn't have closure. It's stuck in a loop of hoping and mourning simultaneously. But in October 2022, a hunter in North Dakota called the police about a shallow grave he'd discovered while tracking deer. The location was remote, nearly 6 hours north of Minneapolis, in woods so dense that even locals rarely ventured there. When the forensic team excavated the site, they found remains wrapped in bedsheets. DNA testing took 3 weeks. On November 2nd, 2022, Shanice received the call she'd been dreading and desperately needing. They'd found Michelle. The medical examiner's report confirmed cause of death: manual strangulation. Time of death was consistent with the day she'd disappeared. There were defensive wounds on her hands. She'd fought. God, she'd fought so hard. Shanice collapsed when she heard. Just fell to her knees in her Brooklyn apartment and screamed until her throat was raw. Her baby sister, who'd survived one monster only to be murdered by another. Her Michelle, who believed in second chances and the goodness of people. Her sweet, hopeful, beautiful sister who just wanted to be loved safely. The funeral was held on November 15th, 2022, at a church in Minneapolis. Over 300 people came. Michelle's students, past and present. Her colleagues from Oakwood Elementary. Parents who'd worked with her. Friends from Brooklyn. People whose lives she'd touched with her kindness, her patience, her light. The pastor spoke about forgiveness and heaven and God's plan. But Shanice couldn't hear any of it over the rage pounding in her head. There was no plan that justified this. No cosmic lesson that required Michelle's murder. There was just evil. Pure, calculated, remorseless evil that wore a human face and called itself love. They buried Michelle next to their father in a cemetery overlooking a lake. The headstone read, Michelle Thompson Chambers. Beloved daughter, sister, teacher, friend. Her light was extinguished too soon, but her love remains eternal. Shanice stood at the grave long after everyone else had left, talking to her sister, apologizing for not protecting her, begging for forgiveness that she knew Michelle would freely give, but that she couldn't give herself. As of January 2026, Marcus Donovan has never been found. The FBI has him on their most wanted list. America's Most Wanted featured his case twice. There have been hundreds of tips, dozens of alleged sightings, but nothing concrete. He's either dead, which some investigators believe, or he's somewhere living under a new identity, possibly with a new victim who has no idea what she's sleeping next to. Raymond Cole, the private investigator, never stopped looking. Even after Shanice ran out of money to pay him, he continued on his own time. I've seen a lot of evil in my career, he told a reporter from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. But this man is different. He doesn't kill out of rage or psychosis. He kills because he's bored. Because the woman stopped being entertaining. That's a special kind of monster. And monsters like that don't stop until they're stopped. In late 2023, there was a potential break in the case. A woman in Portland, Oregon named Destiny Williams contacted police about her new husband, a man named Christopher Bennett, who she'd married 6 months earlier. Something about the way he asked questions, the way he tracked her movements, the way he'd isolated her from friends reminded her of the Eric Chambers case she'd seen on the news. Police investigated Christopher Bennett and found he'd only existed since late 2022, right after Michelle's body was discovered. They set up surveillance. They prepared to move in. But Christopher/Marcus was always one step ahead. He disappeared 2 days before police obtained a warrant for his arrest. Destiny came home from work to find an empty house. No note. No explanation. Just gone. Like he'd never existed. The FBI believes he saw the surveillance. They believe he's monitoring his own case, reading the news coverage, staying informed. And they believe he's getting better at this. More careful. More patient. The gaps between victims might be longer now. He might have learned from his mistakes. Or he might be done. Some psychologists theorize that Michelle's murder satisfied something in him, completed some dark ritual in his mind. They point to the ring he left on the counter, the deliberate staging of the scene. It had the feeling of a finale, a last performance. But Raymond Cole doesn't believe that. And neither does Shanice. They know he's out there. They can feel it. Somewhere, some woman is falling in love with a charming man who seems too good to be true. Somewhere, someone is ignoring red flags because they're desperate to believe in happy endings. Somewhere, Marcus Donovan is weaving his web again. Michelle's mother, Lorraine, died in her sleep in March 2024, exactly 2 years after Michelle's murder. The doctors said it was a heart attack, but Shanice knew better. Her mother had died of a broken heart. She died from the unbearable weight of outliving her child, of never getting justice, of spending her final years consumed by grief and rage and helplessness. Shanice inherited everything. The house in Brooklyn where they'd grown up. Michelle's belongings that had been returned from Minneapolis. Boxes and boxes of memories. Photo albums. Michelle's college diploma. Her teaching certificates. Cards from students. A journal Michelle had kept during her divorce from Darnell, filled with hope for the future, excitement about starting over, determination to find real love. I deserve someone who sees me, Michelle had written in July 2019. Someone who lifts me up instead of tearing me down. Someone who makes me feel safe. I know that man exists. I know my happy ending is coming. I just have to be patient and open and brave. Shanice couldn't read anymore. She closed the journal and added it to the box of things too painful to look at, but too precious to throw away. The box sat in her closet, a shrine to a future that never came. Jasmine, Michelle's friend and colleague, left teaching after the murder. She couldn't walk into Oakwood Elementary without seeing Michelle's empty classroom, without hearing her laugh in the hallways, without remembering the last conversation they'd had where Michelle had seemed distracted, worried, trapped. Jasmine went into therapy and eventually became a counselor specializing in domestic violence. She dedicates every session to Michelle's memory, helping other women recognize the signs that Michelle had missed until it was too late. Angela Morrison, the woman from Phoenix who'd tried to warn Michelle, carries a guilt that therapy can't touch. I should have done more, she told a documentary filmmaker in 2025. I should have called the police myself. I should have flown to Minneapolis and dragged Michelle out of that house. I knew what he was capable of, and I left it up to her to save herself. And now she's dead because I wasn't brave enough. The documentary, titled The Man with Many Faces, The Murder of Michelle Chambers, aired on Netflix in October 2025. It featured interviews with Shanice, Angela, Raymond Cole, and the FBI agents working the case. The final episode ended with Michelle's photo, smiling in her classroom surrounded by kindergartners, and a plea. If you know anything about the whereabouts of Marcus Donovan, please contact the FBI. He is considered extremely dangerous. He may be using an assumed name. He targets vulnerable women, often those recovering from previous trauma. If your partner's background seems too clean, if they seem too perfect, if something in your gut tells you to run, listen to it. Michelle Thompson Chambers didn't, and it cost her everything. The documentary went viral. Millions of people watched. Michelle's story became a cautionary tale shared in women's groups, domestic violence shelters, and therapy sessions across the country. But for those who loved her, she was more than a cautionary tale. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a teacher who'd changed lives. A woman who deserved so much better than the hand fate had dealt her. Shanice tortures herself with what-ifs. What if she'd flown to Minneapolis sooner? What if she'd been more insistent when Michelle brushed off her concerns? What if she'd told Michelle about her own suspicions instead of encouraging her to trust Eric? What if she'd kidnapped Michelle herself, dragged her back to Brooklyn, and refused to let her return? Would she have hated me? Shanice asks her therapist in session after session. If I'd forced her to leave, would she have resented me? Would she have gone back to him anyway? Or would she be alive right now, teaching her students, living her life? Dr. Williams responds with gentle truth. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Michelle made her choices based on the information she had and the person she was. She was kind. She was forgiving. She believed in redemption. Those are beautiful qualities that made her an incredible person. They're also the qualities Marcus exploited. You didn't fail her, Shanice. The system failed her. Society failed her. And a monster targeted her specifically because of her goodness. But the logic doesn't stop the guilt. Doesn't stop the nightmares. Doesn't stop Shanice from jumping every time her phone rings, irrationally hoping it's Michelle calling to say it was all a mistake. She's alive, she's safe, she's coming home. The students at Oakwood Elementary created a memorial garden for Miss Chambers. It's a small plot near the playground with Michelle's favorite flowers, sunflowers, because she'd always told her students that they should grow toward the light. There's a bench with a plaque that reads, "In memory of Michelle Chambers, who taught us that kindness is the greatest lesson." Every year on her birthday, former students and their parents gather there to share stories, to remember, to grieve. But here's what breaks Shanice's heart every single time she visits that garden. Michelle never got to see the impact she made. She never knew how many lives she'd touched. She died thinking she was just a kindergarten teacher, just a divorced woman who'd made another mistake, just another statistic in a long line of women who'd trusted the wrong man. She died believing she'd failed at love, at life, at everything that mattered. She didn't know that she was beloved, that she was mourned, that her memory would inspire legislative change. The Michelle Chambers Act, passed in Minnesota in 2024, requires more thorough background checks and waiting periods for marriage licenses, and provides funding for domestic violence prevention education. She didn't know that her story would save lives, that women across the country would hear her name and choose to leave, choose to question, choose to trust their instincts. She didn't know that in dying, she'd become a warrior for all the women still fighting. But God, Shanice wishes she'd known it while she was alive. Wishes Michelle could have felt even a fraction of the love that poured out after her death. Wishes her sister could have understood her worth before a monster convinced her she had none. Here's the truth that everyone who loved Michelle has to live with. There were signs. There were moments when intervention was possible. There were opportunities to save her. But in the moment, in real time, those signs looked like love. Those red flags looked like vulnerability. Those warning bells sounded like the echo of past trauma, making them paranoid. Because that's what makes predators like Marcus so effective. They don't announce themselves. They study their prey. They learn the language of trust. They weaponize vulnerability. They turn a woman's best qualities, her compassion, her forgiveness, her hope, into the very tools that destroy her. Michelle did everything right after leaving Darnell. She went to therapy. She took time to heal. She built boundaries. She was careful. She questioned. And still, Marcus found the cracks in her armor. Still, he slipped through. Because some people are just that good at being evil. Some monsters are just that skilled at wearing human skin. The FBI's lead investigator on the case, Special Agent Kendra Martinez, put it this way in the documentary. Marcus Donovan represents a type of predator we're seeing more frequently. Intelligent, patient, able to maintain a facade for months or even years. He likely has some form of antisocial personality disorder, but he's high-functioning enough to blend in seamlessly. He understands empathy intellectually even if he can't feel it emotionally. He knows how to mirror it, replicate it, perform it. And that makes him almost impossible to detect until it's too late. Agent Martinez continued, her voice heavy with the weight of too many cases like this. What haunts me about Michelle's case is that she did everything we tell women to do. She left her abuser. She rebuilt her life. She was cautious with new relationships. She had a support system. She communicated her concerns. And none of it mattered because Marcus was better at manipulation than she was at protecting herself. And that's not her fault. That's not her failure. That's the reality of dealing with a sophisticated predator. Sometimes you can do everything right and still lose. In the 2 years since Michelle's body was found, Shanice has received letters. Hundreds of them. From women across the country who saw themselves in Michelle's story. Women who left after hearing about her. Women who recognized their own Eric in the details. Women who chose their safety over their hope because Michelle's tragedy showed them what hope could cost. One letter from a woman named Keisha in Atlanta read, "I was engaged to a man who seemed perfect. Too perfect. Your sister's story made me look closer. I found the tracking app. I found the notes. I left 3 days later. I'm alive because Michelle isn't. Please know that her death saved my life. I think about her every day." Another from Brittany in Seattle. "My boyfriend's background was too clean. Everything about him was too smooth, too practiced. I thought I was being paranoid. Then I watched the documentary about Michelle. I hired a private investigator. Turns out my boyfriend was using a fake name. He'd done this before. I'm in hiding now, but I'm alive. Michelle's story gave me permission to trust my gut instead of his explanations." Shanice keeps every letter in a binder. She reads them when the grief becomes unbearable, when she needs to remember that Michelle's death meant something, that it wasn't just senseless violence but a catalyst for awareness, for change, for survival. But here's what nobody tells you about being the sister who survived. Every woman who gets saved because of Michelle's story is a reminder that Michelle didn't get saved. Every life preserved is evidence of the life lost. Shanice is grateful for the letters, but they also break her open every single time. Because if Michelle's story could save all these women, why couldn't it save Michelle? Why did she have to be the lesson instead of the student who learned from someone else's tragedy? The guilt of survivorship is its own kind of prison. Shanice goes to therapy twice a week. She takes medication for the depression and anxiety that threaten to swallow her whole. She does the work of grieving, of healing, of forgiving herself for things that weren't her fault. But some days, the weight of living while Michelle is dead feels like too much to carry. On those days, Shanice goes to the Memorial Garden at Oakwood Elementary. She sits on the bench surrounded by sunflowers and talks to her sister. She tells her about the letters, about the women who are alive because Michelle isn't, about the legislation, about the documentary, about all the ways Michelle's story is changing the world. And then she cries, because changing the world doesn't bring her sister back. Saving other women doesn't resurrect Michelle. Impact and legacy and meaning are beautiful, but they're not a substitute for having her sister answer the phone when she calls. They're not the same as hearing Michelle's laugh, or seeing her smile, or watching her play with her students, or growing old together. Michelle is gone. Forever. And no amount of good that comes from her death will ever make that okay. Sometimes in crowded places, Shanice sees him. Or thinks she does. A man with dark eyes and a charming smile. A face that could be Marcus's, or could be any face, morphed by her trauma into the monster who destroyed her family. She'll freeze, her heart hammering, her breath catching, and she'll stare until the man notices and looks uncomfortable. And then she'll realize it's just a stranger. Just another man in the world who happens to exist while Michelle doesn't. The FBI warns her about this. About the hypervigilance that never shuts off. About seeing threats everywhere. About the way trauma rewires your brain to search constantly for danger. But knowing it's a symptom doesn't make it stop. Shanice can't walk past a man who fits Marcus's general description without analyzing him, memorizing his features, wondering if this is the day, if this is the moment when she'll finally come face to face with her sister's killer. She imagines that confrontation constantly. What she'd say, what she'd do, whether she'd attack him herself or call the police, whether she'd demand answers or just scream until her voice gave out. In her fantasies, she's brave and powerful and gets justice for Michelle. In reality, she knows she'd probably just cry. Just stand there weeping at the sight of the man who took everything, and the unfairness of him still breathing while Michelle rots in the ground. Raymond Cole tells her that justice might never come. That Marcus is too smart, too careful, too experienced. That he might die of old age in some anonymous town under some fake name, having lived a full life while Michelle's ended at 32. Shanice hates him for saying it even. Though she knows he's probably right. Even though she's thought the same thing herself during countless sleepless nights. The police have moved on to newer cases. The FBI still has Marcus on their list, but resources are limited and leads are non-existent. The truth is, unless Marcus makes a mistake, unless some new victim comes forward, unless a miracle happens, he's going to get away with it. He's going to be one of those criminals who live free while their victims live in eternal silence. And that injustice, that cosmic wrongness, that absolute failure of the universe to balance the scales, it eats at Shanice every single day. It makes her angry at God if God exists. Makes her question every platitude about karma and divine justice and good triumphing over evil. Because in Michelle's story, evil won. Evil is still winning. And there's nothing Shanice can do about it except carry the weight and hope that someday, somehow, the scales will tip. Michelle's murder didn't just destroy Shanice and Lorraine. It rippled outward, touching everyone in Michelle's orbit. Her students, some as young as 5 when she died, carry the trauma of losing their teacher to violence they're too young to understand fully. Parents have had to explain death to children who loved Miss Chambers, have had to navigate questions like, why would someone hurt her? And is it my fault for not protecting her? When they're grappling with the same unanswerable questions themselves. Jasmine, Michelle's colleague who became a counselor, told a support group, I watch these kids grow up and I see Michelle's absence in their lives. I see the teacher they should have had in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. I see the graduations she'll miss. The weddings. The lives she would have touched for years and years. Marcus didn't just kill Michelle. He killed all the future good she would have done. All the children she would have taught. All the love she would have shared. He killed a universe of possibility, and we're all living in the darker timeline because of it. The community of Minneapolis itself shifted after Michelle's murder. Women's self-defense classes saw enrollment spike. Domestic violence hotlines reported increased calls. Therapy practices specializing in trauma had waitlists months long. Michelle's death woke people up to the reality that violence can find you even when you're doing everything right, that safety is sometimes an illusion, that the world is more dangerous than we want to believe. But awareness came at the cost of innocence. Children at Oakwood Elementary lost their sense of security. Parents became more fearful, more protective, more suspicious. The school hired additional security. They implemented stricter protocols for visitors. They created emergency response plans for active threats. All because of what happened to Miss Chambers. All because evil walked through their community wearing the face of love. Michelle's church, where she'd sung in the choir and volunteered in the nursery, held a vigil every month for the first year after her death. Pastor Holland spoke about faith in the midst of unspeakable tragedy, about trusting God's plan even when it makes no sense, about finding meaning in suffering. Some people found comfort in his words. Others, like Shanice, felt alienated by them. There is no plan that requires my sister's murder, Shanice shouted during one vigil, standing up in the middle of the service. There is no divine purpose served by her being strangled and buried in the woods. Don't you dare stand up there and tell me God needed another angel when a demon is walking free. Don't you dare make her death mean something cosmic when it just means a monster one. She walked out and never went back. But dozens of people followed her out that day. Dozens of people who were also tired of pretending that faith made grief easier, that prayer changed outcomes, that Michelle's death was anything other than a preventable tragedy that the universe allowed to happen. Let me tell you who Michelle really was beyond the tragedy. Beyond the headlines and the documentaries and the cautionary tale. Michelle Thompson was a girl who loved sunflowers because they turned toward the light. She was a teacher who kept a drawer full of snacks for students who came to school hungry. She was a daughter who called her mother every Sunday without fail. She was a sister who knew exactly what to say to make Shanice laugh when she was crying. Michelle sang off-key and didn't care. She danced in grocery store aisles when her favorite song came on the overhead speakers. She cried during commercials for animal shelters. She collected smooth stones from beaches and kept them in jars on her windowsill. She wrote thank you notes by hand because she believed it meant more than a text. She remembered birthdays and showed up, always. She had a scar on her left knee from falling off her bike when she was 7. She hated olives but loved olive oil. She could quote entire episodes of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She wanted 3 children someday. 2 girls and a boy. She decided when she was 12 and never changed her mind. She wanted to travel to Ghana and trace her family's roots. She wanted to write a children's book about a girl who learns to be brave. She survived Darnell's abuse and came out stronger. She rebuilt herself from nothing. She moved across the country alone and started over. She made new friends. She found joy again. She learned to trust again. And that wasn't weakness. That was courage. That was hope. That was Michelle being exactly who she was meant to be. Someone who believed in second chances, in redemption, in the fundamental goodness of people. Marcus targeted her specifically because of those qualities. He saw her light and wanted to extinguish it. He saw her hope and wanted to weaponize it. He saw her kindness and knew it was the knife he could twist deepest. But here's what he didn't understand, and what everyone needs to know. Michelle's light didn't die with her. It lives in every woman who hears her story and chooses to leave. It lives in every policy change that makes women safer. It lives in every child she taught who remembers her kindness. It lives in Shanice, who wakes up every day and chooses to continue Michelle's fight even though it hurts more than anything. Marcus took Michelle's life. He took her future. He took her breath and her dreams and her chance to be the mother and grandmother and elder she was supposed to become. But he didn't take her impact. He didn't take her legacy. He didn't take the love she left behind. And as long as people remember her, as long as her story saves even one life, Marcus loses a little bit of his victory. There is no neat conclusion to this story. No closure. No moment when Shanice wakes up and the grief is gone. Michelle is still dead. Marcus is still free. The injustice is still absolute. These are facts that don't change no matter how much time passes or how much healing happens. Shanice is 38 now, 4 years older than Michelle ever got to be. She's aging past her sister, watching herself in the mirror and seeing her own face grow older while Michelle's face in photographs stays frozen at 32, forever young, forever caught between hope and tragedy. She's dating someone now, a gentle man named Devin who knows about Michelle and doesn't try to fix Shanice's grief. He just holds her when she cries, accompanies her to the memorial garden, listens when she tells Michelle stories for the 100th time. He's patient with her hypervigilance, her background checks, her need to know where he is and who he's with. He understands that Michelle's murder taught Shanice that trust is a luxury she can't afford. "I'll never marry again," Shanice told him early in their relationship. Michelle's marriage ended with her buried in the woods. "My mother's heart broke watching her daughter's murder go unsolved. I can't do it. I can't trust someone that much. I can't make myself that vulnerable. If you need marriage, you should leave now." Devin stayed. He stays still. He doesn't pressure. He doesn't demand. He just shows up consistently, safely, boringly reliably. And maybe that's what love looks like after trauma. Maybe it's not fireworks and grand gestures and perfect fairy tale moments. Maybe it's just someone who stays when staying is hard. Shanice thinks Michelle would approve, would want her to be happy, would tell her to live the life Michelle never got to finish. But then Shanice feels guilty for being happy, for moving forward, for existing in a future that doesn't include her sister. The grief therapist says this is normal. Says survivor's guilt is part of the process. Says Shanice is allowed to build a life even though Michelle's was taken. Knowing it intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. Shanice carries the guilt like a second skeleton. It shapes her movements, her choices, her dreams. It makes her wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if she's forgetting Michelle, if she's betraying her by laughing too loud or loving too freely or daring to imagine a future. But here's what Shanice has learned in 4 years of therapy and grief and rage and slow, painful healing. Michelle wouldn't want this for her. Michelle, who loved sunflowers and children and second chances, would want Shanice to live, to thrive, to love safely, to remember joyfully instead of only mourning painfully. Michelle gave everything for love, believed in it even when it killed her. She would want her sister to find it, keep it, cherish it. So Shanice tries. Some days are easier than others. Some days she can talk about Michelle and smile at the memories. Other days, she can barely say her sister's name without shattering. There's no linear path through grief. No graduation from the pain. Just endless cycles of better and worse, of remembering and forgetting, of living and surviving. If you're listening to this story, really listening, here's what you need to understand. Michelle Thompson Chambers was not naive. She was not stupid. She was not asking for what happened to her. She was a smart, kind, careful woman who was targeted by a predator who was better at lying than she was at detecting lies. And that is not her fault. There are Marcus Donovans everywhere. Men who study vulnerability the way surgeons study anatomy. Men who see trauma as opportunity. Men who perfect the performance of love while feeling absolutely nothing. They're in every city, every community, every demographic. They adapt. They learn. They get better at hunting. And the only way to fight them is with awareness. With education. With believing women when they say something feels wrong. With not dismissing red flags as paranoia. With understanding that too good to be true usually is. with trusting our gut even when our heart wants to believe. The Michelle Chambers Foundation, started by Shanice in 2023, provides free background check services for women entering new relationships. It offers counseling for domestic violence survivors. It teaches workshops on recognizing manipulation tactics. It lobbies for stronger identity verification laws and longer waiting periods for marriage licenses. All in Michelle's name. All because her death demanded that something change. Thousands of women have used the foundation's services. Dozens have discovered that their partners were using fake identities. Several have avoided becoming Marcus's next victim. And while that's meaningful, while it matters, while it saves lives, it doesn't bring Michelle back. Nothing does. Nothing will. That's the unbearable truth Shanice lives with every single day. So why am I telling you this story? Why am I making you sit through this tragedy? Because someone out there, right now, is dating their own Marcus. Someone is ignoring the signs because they desperately want to believe in love after trauma. Someone is rationalizing away their instincts because questioning feels like failing at faith. And maybe, just maybe, Michelle's story will be the thing that saves them. Maybe some woman will hear about the tracking app and check her own phone. Maybe someone will hear about the too perfect facade and look a little closer at their charming partner. Maybe someone will remember Michelle's blue door and porch swing and sunflowers and decide that their life is worth protecting, even if it means walking away from someone they love. Because here's the final, devastating truth. Michelle loved Eric with her whole heart. She loved him enough to forgive the unforgivable. She loved him enough to stay when she should have run. She loved him enough to die for him. And he killed her anyway. Because love cannot fix evil. Love cannot heal someone who doesn't want to be healed. Love cannot save you from someone who has decided you're disposable. Michelle deserved a happy ending. She deserved the children she wanted and the travels she dreamed about and the quiet, boring, beautiful life she'd worked so hard to build. Instead, she got a monster who wore the mask of her dreams. She got betrayal disguised as love. She got a grave in the woods instead of a future. And somewhere out there, Marcus Donovan is still breathing, still existing, still possibly hunting. While Michelle's kindergarten students are in middle school now, growing up without the teacher who would have shaped their lives. While Shanice grows older than her little sister ever got to be. While Lorraine's grave sits next to Michelle's, two women destroyed by the same evil. While the world keeps spinning like Michelle's absence doesn't matter. But it does matter. Michelle mattered. She matters still. And if her story stops even one woman from becoming another statistic, another cold case, another memorial garden, then maybe, in some small way, the universe balances just slightly toward justice. This is the story of Michelle Thompson Chambers, the woman who survived one nightmare only to die in another. The teacher who gave everything and got nothing in return except betrayal and violence. The sister who trusted again and paid for it with her life. Share this story. Not because it's entertaining. Not because it's dramatic. Share it because somewhere, someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know that their instincts matter more than their hope. That leaving is always better than staying with someone who makes you feel afraid. That love should never hurt, never control, never make you disappear piece by piece until there's nothing left to save. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, if it broke your heart, leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me if you've experienced something similar. Tell me if Michelle's story saved you or someone you love. This conversation needs to continue. These warnings need to spread. Because predators rely on silence. They rely on isolation. They rely on women not talking to each other, not warning each other, not believing each other. And if you're in a situation that feels like Michelle's, if someone in your life is showing the signs Marcus showed, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence. They're available 24/7. They can help. You deserve help. You deserve safety. You deserve the life Michelle never got to finish. This is part 1 of Michelle's story. In part 2, we'll dive deeper into Marcus Donovan's background, explore the other victims, examine the FBI's ongoing investigation, and hear from the women who survived him. We'll look at the psychology of predators like Marcus and learn the specific warning signs that can save your life. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Because Michelle's story isn't over. The fight for justice isn't over. And as long as Marcus Donovan is free, every woman needs to know what he looks like, how he operates, and how to protect themselves from men exactly like him. Michelle's light was extinguished on March 28, 2022. But her voice continues through everyone who shares her story. Through everyone who learns from her tragedy. through everyone who chooses survival over hope when hope becomes dangerous. Rest in power, Michelle Thompson Chambers. Your death will not be in vain. Your story will save lives. And one day, somehow, justice will find the monster who took you from us. One day,